Yoki is the strongest demon in the demon kingdom, destined to slay the hero party and ensure the demon king's victory. But there's just one problem: he has a crush on one of the hero party members. The hero party has finally arrived outside the demon castle, and they have completed all the side quests, so they are certain that they are strong enough to win. However, upon entering the castle, they run into a low-level demon general, Yoki, and he absolutely mops the floor with them. No matter how many overpowered moves they use, Yoki is able to outdo them, eventually rendering all of the heroes unconscious, but instead of finishing them off, he starts healing their wounds since he wouldn't want them dying because of him. But that's when he notices that the support mage of the hero party is actually pretty cute. He spends a solid 10 minutes just staring at her, but then his subordinates come out and they think it's kind of weird that he has just been standing over the unconscious girl for a while. They ask him if he's going to finish off the heroes so they can get on with their day, but Yuki says he doesn't want to kill anyone. Instead, he tells his subordinates to drop the heroes off at a nearby village before they wake up, so they all start dragging the bodies away, and Yoki is disappointed that he missed his chance to shoot his shot. 1 month later, Yoki is giving a report to the Demon Lord, and apparently, the heroes have tried to break in 13 more times in the past month, and every single time, Yoki knocks them out and drops them off at a safe location. The Demon Lord praises him for dealing with he intruders so easily, but he asks why Yoki doesn't kill them. Yoki makes up an excuse and says the heroes are so weak that he doesn't think it's worth killing them, but in reality, he just didn't like killing people. The Demon Lord tells him that if he doesn't want to kill them, he will have to ask his subordinates to do it instead, but Yoki knows damn well that his subordinates wouldn't stand a chance of beating those heroes, and even if they did, he wouldn't want to let that cute girl die, so he tells the Demon Lord he will take care of the heroes personally next time. The Demon Lord is pleased to hear him say that, so he dismisses Yoki, but as he is walking back to his room, he starts wondering what he should do. If he tries to spare the heroes next time, it will cause a lot of trouble, but if he lets them fight the other demons, the castle would be annihilated. Those heroes may look weak compared to him, but that's just because Yoki is unbelievably overpowered, so if they ever managed to get past him, they would definitely defeat the Demon Lord no problem. He wouldn't particularly care if the Demon Lord was defeated, but he doesn't want the priestess to get hurt, so he comes up with a plan. The next time the heroes try to invade the demon castle, Yoki once again completely dominates them, but this time, instead of knocking all of them out, he lets them get back to their feet and offers them a choice. He says that by now, it should be clear to them that they stand no chance of getting past him, but he is willing to make an exception today. He says he will allow them to pass, but only on the condition that they leave the priestess here with him. Yuga immediately refuses since he would never leave a comrade behind, but the mage comes up to him and says he should probably take the deal since this might be their only chance to defeat the Demon Lord. Besides, Yoki has had tons of opportunities to kill them over the last month, yet every time, he just drops them off safe and sound, so Cecilia will probably be fine. Still, Yuga doesn't think it's right to leave his comrade in the hands of the enemy, but Cecilia tells him to go ahead without her because she will be fine on her own. Since Cecilia is insisting, the others all agree to Yoki's deal and move ahead, leaving Cecilia and Yoki alone in the room. Now that the others are gone, Cecilia faces Yoki and asks him what he plans to do to her, but to her utter shock, he says he fell in love with her at first sight and asks her to be his girlfriend. Of all the things Cecilia thought would happen, she didn't expect to receive a confession from a demon general, and she doesn't know how she's supposed to react to that, so she just politely turns him down. Yoki is heartbroken and curls up into a ball on the floor to await death because nothing matters to him anymore. Cecilia feels kind of bad, so she asks Yoki if he's alright, but then she realizes that this might all be a trick to get her to lower her guard, so she raises her scepter and points it at Yoki, but surprisingly, he doesn't react at all and just sits there. She asks him why he's not fighting back, so Yoki responds and tells her there's no point. The only thing that mattered to him was confessing his feelings to her, and since she rejected him, he is ready to die knowing he tried his best. Cecilia still thinks he's trying to trick her, but Yoki tells her he really is tired of living like this. As a demon general, he is forced to guard this room constantly, and the only time he's allowed to go outside is to attack human villages, and he doesn't want to do that sort of thing. He may be a demon now, but that's just because he was reincarnated into this world, so inside, he is still a human at heart. If that's the case, then Cecilia asks why he chooses to serve the Demon Lord, because she's sure that with his power he could take him out if he wanted to. Yoki says he considered it, but then he realized that if he killed the Demon Lord, then he would automatically become the new Demon Lord, and that would be much worse for him. So he chose to just live his life as a low-level guard to avoid as much damage as possible. His life was all around gloomy and unbearable, but that all changed when he saw Cecilia's face. He may have only known her for a month, and yes, most of that time was spent with him knocking her out, but that was the best month of his entire life as a demon. So now that it's over, he doesn't care what happens anymore. Cecilia tells him to stop talking like that, because if he is truly human on the inside, as he says, then it's not too late for him to live a fulfilling life. A few days later, after the hero party successfully defeated the demon lord, they return to the capital where the king thanks them for their valiant efforts. He declares that the next 3 days shall be dedicated to celebrating the achievements of the hero party, but at the same time, outside the city, Yoki has just arrived and is preparing to start his life as a human. Cecilia gave him directions on how to get here, so now all he needs to do is blend in as a human and he will be able to spend time with her. But first, he needs to get rid of his horn, and it's definitely going to hurt. While the parade for the heroes is going on, Yoki makes his way into the Adventurers Guild and asks to register. The guy at the counter is annoyed by Yoki, but not because he doesn't like him. It's because he's lazy and wanted to get through the day without having it do any work. Since Yoki wants to register, he pulls out a registration form and hands it to him to be filled out. After Yoki fills out the form, Clayman processes it and creates a guild card for him. He explains that Yoki will have to start at F rank, but he can work his way up to S by completing quests and raising his reputation. Once Yoki confirms that he understands the rules, Clayman is about to hand over his guild card. But before he does, he tells Yoki that reissuing these cards is a massive pain in the butt, so he had better not lose it. Specifically, within the next 3 days, because Clayman is the only one on shift until the Hero Festival ends, and he doesn't want to have to deal with all the administrative hassle. Yoki promises to be careful, so he takes his card and heads out to complete a few missions, and by the end of the day, he has earned quite a bit of money. He hasn't met Cecilia yet, but his plan is to work as an adventurer for a while and become successful enough to be worthy of Cecilia, and after doing all that, when he confesses to her again, she's bound to accept his love. Over the next few days, Yoki routinely shows up at the guild to take on as many quests as he can, and he is already starting to draw a bit of attention because people are surprised by how fast he has been ranking up. Today, he is taking out another 5 quests, so he walks right up to Clayman's desk and asks him to process these for him, but Clay is pissed because he doesn't understand why Yoki keeps bringing so much work to him when there's another receptionist right over there. Yoki tells Clay he has simply grown fond of him, especially since he's surprisingly fast at processing all the quest forms he brings. But speaking of which, Clay is starting to wonder who Yoki really is, because there's no way an ordinary newbie would be able to raise their rank from F to D in a single week. Yoki is a little worried since he didn't realize working so hard might get him in trouble, but Clay has no intention of investigating him. It would be too much work, and it's not like ranking up quickly is a crime, so there's no reason for Yoki to get in trouble over it. Yoki is relieved to hear that, but before Clay could finish processing the quests, Cecilia walks up and asks Yoki to cancel his quests for the day. He's excited to see her again, but she looks like she has something serious to discuss, so she asks Yoki to come to her house so the two of them can talk. Yoki immediately agrees, and once they finally arrive, Cecilia takes him inside and prepares a cup of tea for him. She apologizes for not being able to meet him sooner, but Yoki says she doesn't need to apologize because he didn't make much of an effort to meet her either. Speaking of which, he asks her how she knew he would be at the guild today. So she explains that pretty much everyone has been talking about him recently. It's almost unheard of for a newbie to rise through the ranks as fast as he has, so it's natural that people would start talking about it. And when Cecilia heard the rumors, she knew it had to be Yoki, which brings her to the topic she wanted to discuss with him. She tells Yoki she would like him to quit being an adventurer, and he is shocked to hear this since it makes no sense, but he's sure there must be a reason, so he asks Cecilia to explain why. Cecilia tells him that the demon lord may have been defeated, but it's not like all the threats in the world are gone, and she is worried that the different nations which have been working together will start fighting to assert superiority over one another. There are already signs of this since countless nations have tried sending their princesses to the hero to establish a political marriage so they can use him as a pawn when the time for war comes. All the nations are busy looking for strong allies to use, and considering how well Yoki has been doing at the guild, it would only be a matter of time before the nations notice and try to recruit him for war. Either that, or they would label him as an enemy, and his new life as a human would be ruined. That's why Cecilia wants him to stop being an adventurer, and Yoki understands why she would be worried, but he's got bills to pay, and adventuring is the only way he can make any money. Cecilia understands that, which is why she says she is willing to hire him personally. However, she doesn't have enough money to pay someone as strong as Yoki what he's worth, so to make up the difference, She offers to do anything he wants because she can't risk letting the nation use him as a pawn in war. Yoki tells her to stop bowing because there's nothing any nation could possibly do to convince him to join a war, especially not an engagement. After all, the only person he is willing to marry is Cecilia. Cecilia is relieved to hear that Yoki isn't going to be swayed, and if he is so certain that he won't fall for any trick, then she tells him he is free to continue adventuring if he wants, though he should still try to keep a low profile. Just then, there's a knock at the door, and it turns out to be Cecilia's mother, and she's here because she's interested in meeting the friend that her daughter brought home. She asks Yoki if Cecilia has told him about her love life yet, and as soon as she mentions it, Cecilia becomes embarrassed, but her mother keeps going anyway. Cecilia has gotten a lot of proposals recently, all of which she turned down, so her mother asks Yoki if he would like to marry Cecilia. Yoki definitely wants to marry Cecilia, but he says he can't do it right now because he doesn't think he is good enough yet, so once he has gotten a stable life, he will confess to her again and she can decide whether she wants to marry him or not. Cecilia's mother likes Yoki's answer, because if he had said yes, she still wouldn't have let him marry her, but his response showed maturity, so she tells him he is welcome in this house anytime. A little while later, we see Yoki in the middle of one of his hero quests, and even though something like this would usually take a full week to complete, he is able to get it done in a single day. However, just as he is about to start heading home, he is suddenly attacked. 3 unknown assailants launch a coordinated attack against him, and Yoki tries to defend himself, but then he realizes that these people look really familiar. They are his subordinates from back when he worked at the demon castle, and he doesn't want to fight them, so he calls a timeout and reveals his true identity. They are all really happy to see that Yoki is still alive, but Duke is also pissed that Yoki practically ditched them back when the hero party attacked. Because he wasn't there to take care of them as usual, they ended up making it to the Demon Lord's throne room and defeating him. It's almost as if Yoki intentionally let the heroes go through without a fight, and on top of all that, he looks like a human now for some reason. Yoki tells them all to calm down because he has a very good reason for what he did, so the 3 wait to hear what he has to say because they know it must be important. But when Yoki tells the only reason he did all this is because he has a crush on the priestess of the hero party, they can't wrap their heads around it. Yoki tells them that from now on, he plans to live as a human, so they don't need to think of him as their captain anymore and are free to do whatever they want. However, they all tell him they don't want to. They much prefer hanging around Yoki, and besides, they really want to meet the woman who stole his heart. Yoki tells them there's no way that can happen because if someone spots them, then it would cause mass panic in the city. They all say that's not a problem since they can just hide their demon features the same way Yoki did, and since they are so insistent, he agrees to let them come, but he warns them that blending in with humans is going to be as easy as they think it is. Later that day, Yoki brings his subordinates to meet Cecilia after disguising themselves, but it was a lot more brutal than they expected, especially for Happiness, since Yoki had to pluck her feathers out one by one. They all sit down to have some tea together, and Cecilia says she's pleased to meet them, but even though she knows they are demons, they don't look like it at all. Duke explains that they all did their best to make themselves look as human as possible, and in his case, since he's a Dullahan, Yoki fused his head into his armor so it wouldn't roll off. Duke seems to be getting along really well with Cecilia, but it's making Yoki a little jealous since Duke never talks this much around him. But all of a sudden, now that he's in front of a cute girl, he's chatting away. Duke explains that he just didn't talk much back then because he used to hate Yoki's guts. Yoki had a reputation for being a total shut-in back at the demon castle, and even when his superior would yell at him to go outside and kill some humans like a respectable demon general, Yoki would just threaten to beat his ass until he eventually gave up and left him alone. However, Duke couldn't stand for such callous behavior from a demon general, so one day, he barged into Yoki's room to teach him a lesson. He had assumed that a shut-in loser would be easy to knock some sense into, but he assumed wrong, and Yoki proceeded to beat him up. After that, he became one of Yoki's subordinates, and while he held a grudge over the ass-whopping he received for a while, he eventually moved past it and accepted Yoki as his leader. He's sure it was the same for Happiness and Shake as well, but speaking of those two, he has no idea where they ran off to. It would be really bad if anyone other than Cecilia were to find out about their true identities, so they head inside to go look for them, and they just so happen to find Cecilia's mother in the garden with Shake sleeping on her lap. Aquaray notices them approaching and asks if they know who this boy is by any chance, so they explain to her that Shake is one of Yoki's friends. Yoki apologizes for any trouble that Shake might have caused, but Aqua tells him there's no need to apologize because she loves spending time with kids. She found Shake running around in the garden, so instead of worrying about insignificant details like how he got in here, She decided to join him, and the two played tag together until Sheik eventually tired himself out and fell asleep. Since Sheik is accounted for, Yoki asks Aqua if she happened to see a girl with Sheik earlier, and she confirms this, but she says the head maid took her away a while ago, so she's probably inside right now. That sounds like trouble waiting to happen, so Yoki and the others rush inside to find her, but to their surprise, they see Happiness being trained on perfect maid etiquette. Once Sophia spots the group, she explains to them that she was just finishing up with training the new maid, but Cecilia informs her that Happiness isn't a maid, she's one of Yoki's friends. Sophia asks Happiness if this is true, and she confirms it, so Sophia apologizes for the mix-up and tells her she can leave if she wants. Yoki tells Happiness she should go change out of the maid outfit, but to his surprise, she says she doesn't want to. Being a maid is a lot more fun than she thought it would be, so she would like to start working here, and Sophia has no objections, so Happiness is now an official maid. By the end of the day, they all get ready to leave and wish Happiness good luck on her first day as a maid. But before Yoki could leave, Aqua pulls him aside and mentions that Cecilia hasn't had a chance to relax in weeks, so she plans to force her to take the day off, so if Yoki was going to ask her out on a date, that would be the best time. This is one of the best layups Yoki has ever received, and he's going to make sure it doesn't go to waste. Once it's time for the date, Cecilia arrives in her carriage, and Yoki is blown away by how nice she looks in her outfit. He says he's going to do everything within his power to make sure she enjoys her day off to the fullest, and she finds it funny that he's taking this so seriously, but she's looking forward to finding out what he has planned. As they walk through town, Cecilia notices that the local bakery has a new type of cake in stock, so she suggests that the two of them should stop by once they are done with their date. In the meantime, the two continue their walk through the city, and Yoki can hardly keep his eyes off Cecilia because she's way too cute, but so far, things have been going really well, and Cecilia really seems to be enjoying herself. They soon pass by an accessory store, and the two of them are about to head in together. But it just so happens that Yuga and Mikana from the hero party were passing by at the same time. As soon as Yuga recognizes her, he calls out to Cecilia, completely ignoring Yoki. He says it's a crazy coincidence that they all took days off on the same day, and since they are all here, he suggests that they should spend the rest of the day together. Cecilia tries to turn him down politely by explaining that she was already spending time with Yoki, and now that Yoki has been mentioned, Yuga feels like the two of them have met somewhere before. Yoki tells him it's probably just his mind playing tricks on him, and Yuga decides to just let it go for now. He then suggests that they should all head in together so no one is left out, and he barely gives Cecilia any time to object before leading her inside. Mikana is upset about this whole thing because the one day she managed to convince Yuga to go on a date with her, this happens. She can tell that Yoki was also on a date with Cecilia, so she wishes him good luck because if he manages to make Cecilia fall for him, then Yuga would have no choice but to focus on her instead. As Yoki heads inside, he meets back up with Cecilia, and since they are here, he offers to buy her a gift. Cecilia tells him he doesn't need to do that, but Yoki says this is his way of thanking her for all the help she has given him, so she eventually agrees. Yuga sees this, and it immediately makes him feel hella jealous, so he cuts in between the two of them and says he wants to pick out gifts for everyone, clearly trying to one-up Yoki. Yoki picks out a necklace that he thinks will look great on Cecilia, while Yuga just picks out the most expensive-looking pendant in the store because he didn't know what else to buy. He tries to get Cecilia to put it on, but in the process, he accidentally knocks off her disguise, and now that she is no longer wearing her hat and pair of glasses, everyone in the store instantly recognizes her and the other members of the hero party. They are all instantly swarmed by fans and chased down the street, causing Yoki to be separated from Cecilia, and while trying to find her, Yoki ends up running into the last member of the hero party, Sir Raven, while he is being swarmed by a group of girls, and he seems pretty uncomfortable. Yoki decides to help him out, so he distracts the crowd by pointing them in the direction of Yuga before grabbing Raven and running into an alley. Once they have lost the crowd, Yoki was expecting Raven to at least thank him, but he remains completely silent, so he assumes Raven just isn't the type to speak much. However, as he is leaving, he hears Raven ask him to wait, and he immediately understands why Raven doesn't speak much. It's because his voice sounds like that of a teenage girl. He usually avoids talking in front of crowds because he is worried that people will laugh, but Yoki doesn't intend to make fun of him for it. After all, everyone has things about themselves that they are insecure about. Raven is relieved to have met someone as understanding as Yoki, but just then, Yoki remembers that he's supposed to be looking for Cecilia, so he takes off running to meet back up with her. The rest of the day goes by without any further problems, but by the next morning, Yoki finds out that Cecilia has come down with a fever as a result of all the stress yesterday. She was already near her breaking point, but having to deal with all those fans at once sent her over the edge, and Yoki feels like this was his fault. Aqua tells Yoki that he doesn't need to feel guilty since Cecilia only has a mild cold, and she isn't mad at him because of the way things turned out. But she is mad at Yuga on the other hand, so they are going to have a long talk about boundaries next time she sees him. Even though he's the one who caused Cecilia's condition, the moment he heard about it, he tried coming over so he could take care of her. But the maids turned him away at the gate before he could cause any more damage. With that said, Aqua thinks it would be nice for Cecilia to see a friend while she's recovering, so she asks Yoki to pay her a visit. Sophia leads Yoki to Cecilia's room and knocks on the door to let her know that he's here. Cecilia begins panicking and asks Yoki to wait outside while she cleans up in here, but Sophia assures her that there's no need to worry because she already put away all of Cecilia's toys before Yoki arrived. But hearing her say it out loud is still just as embarrassing. Either way, it's fine for Yoki to enter now, so he walks in and takes a seat next to her bed. He apologizes for how things turned out and tells her he will make it up to her somehow, but Cecilia says she doesn't blame him for what happened. However, if he really feels guilty about it, then she tells him he can make it up to her by going out on another date with her once she has recovered. Yoki is stunned for a moment because Cecilia basically asked him out just now, and it's the best thing that has happened to him all day, so he tells her he will make sure their next date will be better than she could ever imagine. Unfortunately, he was a bit too enthusiastic with his declaration, and yelling around Cecilia might make her condition worse, so Sophia comes in and politely kicks him out. He is about to head home, but all of a sudden, he notices Raven nervously walking up to Cecilia's house, and he's curious about what he's doing here, so he goes over to say hi. Raven seems like he has a lot on his mind, so Yuki asks if there's something bothering him, and Raven admits that he's trying to build up the courage to confess to the girl he likes. Just like Yoki, she didn't laugh at his voice when she heard it, and ever since then, Raven has had a crush on her, but he's not sure if she likes him back. Yoki doesn't really understand what Raven is so worried about because he is tall, handsome, and famous. The only problem he has is his voice, and the girl he likes has already said she doesn't mind it, so he's got a pretty good chance of her accepting his feelings. Raven realizes that Yoki is right, so he decides to go through with his confession, and Yoki is proud of him. But then he realizes that Raven is walking right up to Cecilia's house, so he might have created more competition for himself. He tries to convince himself that Cecilia would never accept such a sudden confession from Raven, but then again, they were in the heroes' party together, so there's a chance that they might have had some romantic moments during their travels. He starts panicking again, but just then, he sees Raven walk back from the mansion completely shattered. He genuinely believed that the worst she could say was no, but he was wrong, and now he just wants to go home and think about his life in the shower. Seeing Raven so dejected gets Yoki curious, so he gets back up to the house and asks Sophia if she knows what happened to Raven when he came over to confess his feelings to Cecilia. She tells him that Raven did indeed come here, but from what she saw, he was here to talk to Happiness. And this information really catches Yoki off guard because he had no idea that Raven had a crush on her. He decides to go talk to Happiness, and when he finally finds her, he asks if she spoke to a red-haired guy a little while ago. Happiness confirms this, so Yoki tells her that Raven is actually one of his friends, and she looks surprised to hear that. Yoki then goes on to ask if it's true that Raven confessed his feelings to her, and if so, he would like to know what she said that made him so upset. Happiness pauses for a moment, but she eventually reveals that when Raven asked her out, she immediately told him it was absolutely impossible. Getting rejected like that would hurt anyone's feelings, so Yoki understands why Raven was so depressed afterwards. But if Happiness doesn't like him, then there's nothing to be done. However, she says she actually does like Raven, but before Yoki could ask her what she means by that, she runs off. Later that night, Yoki calls a meeting with the rest of his subordinates to discuss what's going on with Happiness and Raven's relationship. The other two have no idea who Raven is supposed to be, so Yoki clarifies that Raven is the swordsman from the hero party. But as soon as he says this, Duke flares up and demands to know why Yoki would set Happiness up with a human. Yoki explains that he wasn't the one who introduced them, and as a matter of fact, he has no idea how they met in the first place, but that's not the issue here. He tells everyone that Raven recently confessed to Happiness, and Duke assumes she must not have taken it well since most of the humans she had dealt with were either trying to capture her for her feathers or were furry lovers. Either way, it was pretty bad. That said, Sheik doesn't think Happiness hates all humans. After all, she willingly chose to work as a maid because she liked the people in the mansion, so she must have been able to tell that Raven is a good guy. The next day, Yoki heads into the guild as usual, but to his surprise, Kramen isn't here today. One of the other receptionists calls Yoki over since she recognizes him as the guy who's always talking to the vice guild master. Yoki has no idea what she's talking about at first, but she explains that despite how lazy Kramen seems, he really is the Vice Guild Master here. This is a shocking revelation, but right now, Yoki is more interested in finding out where Kramen went. It's kind of supposed to be a secret, but since Yoki is friends with Kramen, the receptionist informs him that he was hospitalized after a fight with his wife. Later that day, Yoki goes to the hospital to pay Kramen a visit, and he's surprised by how badly he was hurt. He asks what happened, so Kramen explains that yesterday was his anniversary, so he wanted to pick out a good present for his wife, but he got so locked in that the entire day went by with him staring at jewelry, and by the time he finally made it home, he had already missed dinner. So his wife thought he had forgotten about the anniversary, and they got into a huge fight afterwards. Yoki thinks Kramen's wife must be pretty strong if she was able to injure him like this, and he says this much is to be expected since she's a former A-rank adventurer. Yoki can't believe Kramen is married to someone who is A-rank level, but for the record, Kramen is also a former A-ranker. It's going to take a while for Kramen to heal from all those wounds naturally, so Yoki offers to use healing magic to help him, but Kramen immediately shuts the idea down. Being injured like this is the perfect excuse to get his wife to nurse him back to health. Just then, Kramen's wife walks in, and it turns out to be Sophia, which is a huge shock to Yoki. He never could have imagined that she would get married to someone like Kramen, but they seem happy together, aside from the occasional violent misunderstanding. A little while later, Yoki is getting ready to leave, so Sophia thanks him for keeping her husband company before she arrived. He says there's no need to thank him because it's normal to visit an injured friend, but speaking of friends, he asks Sophia if Cecilia is doing any better today. She tells him that Cecilia's fever is gone, so she is feeling a lot better now, but she is currently out running errands, so he won't be able to see her for a while. Yoki asks Sophia if she has any ideas for a good gift he could give her since he wants to do something nice for her, but she tells him that as long as it comes from the heart, Cecilia will be happy with anything he gets her. Yoki thanks her for the advice and leaves the hospital, but as he is walking down the street, he starts fantasizing about what it would be like if he and Cecilia ever got married. By the time he snaps out of it, he realizes that he's near the night dorm, so he decides to check in on Raven while he's here. He opens the door and finds Raven lying in bed, just as depressed as he was the day Happiness rejected him, and he feels bad for the guy, so he wants to help. He asks Raven if he can explain how he and Happiness first met, so Raven tells him it all started on one ordinary afternoon. Raven was busy with his daily patrol when he suddenly noticed a girl being harassed by a couple of drunk guys. He swiftly dealt with the first guy, and after the others realized who he was, they all ran away, so his job here was done. Since Happiness was safe now, he turned to walk away, but she suddenly grabbed his cape to thank him. Raven told her there's no need to thank him, since he's just doing his job, but then he realized that he had just revealed his voice to a stranger, and he started worrying that she might make fun of him for it. However, on the contrary, Happiness told him he had a nice voice. At first, he thought she might be joking, but Happiness was as serious as can be because she genuinely liked the way Raven's voice sounded. She then thanked him again for saving her and ran off to finish her shopping for the day, but she left a lasting impression on him. That's why he eventually worked up the courage to confess to her. But it didn't go as well as he thought it would. He thinks it was a mistake to confess so soon when they barely know each other because it probably made her uncomfortable. However, Yoki tells him he shouldn't give up so soon because he has a feeling that he might still have a chance with Happiness. But for now, he suggests that the two of them should go out for a while to cheer him up. Yoki ends up taking Raven to the jewelry store that he came to with Cecilia last time, because he never got to buy that necklace for her. And while they are there, Raven spots a beautiful pendant that would look great on Happiness. He isn't sure whether he should buy it or not, since Happiness might think it's weird to receive a gift from someone she barely knows, but Yoki assures him that she will appreciate the thought he put into it. And if nothing else, she's bound to like the design because it suits her really well. Raven eventually decides to buy the pendant, and since he doesn't want anyone to hear his voice, he communicates with the cashier through a pen and paper. However, as they are leaving the store, Yoki and Raven end up running into Mikana, and she's surprised to see the two of them in a jewelry store together. She asks what they are doing here, and Yoki immediately responds, saying they are here to buy gifts for the women they love. Mikana already knew that Yoki has a crush on Cecilia, so she isn't surprised by that, but she had no idea that Raven had a crush as well. She asks him to spill the beans, but Raven refuses to say a word around her, and it's entirely her fault because she once made fun of his voice, and ever since then, he has been too self-conscious to talk around her. Mikana feels bad about it, and she has already apologized, but she knows apologizing doesn't change what she did, so she doesn't want to force him. However, even if Raven doesn't want to speak to her, she still wants to hear all the details about his crush, so she invites him and Yoki to have lunch with her. However, just when she thinks they'll finally be willing to talk, Yoki and Raven start stuffing their faces with food so they don't have to say anything. It was a perfect plan, but as soon as Mikana mentions that she could tell Yoki some stories about Cecilia if he talks to her, he immediately gives up on the plan. Mikana asks him how far he has gone with Cecilia, and he tells her it's nothing special because they aren't dating yet, and she apparently got tons of marriage offers, including one from Yuga. Hearing this gets Mikana a little worked up because she doesn't understand why he won't pick up on her hints already. He has always been a bit of an airhead, so he would sometimes accidentally walk in on her and Cecilia changing or taking a bath. And he is so popular with the ladies that a huge crowd always formed no matter where they went. It was never really intentional on his part, but his carefree behavior did really annoy Cecilia, and she can be terrifying when she's mad. Mikana then asks Raven about his crush, but Yoki cuts her off because he doesn't want to let her mess with him. Mikana promises that she's not trying to make fun of him for his crush or anything, she just has a few relationship problems of her own that she wanted to talk about. The truth is, she has a feeling that Yuga hates her because of something she did. She tells Yoki that, although the kingdom's report says they claimed absolute victory over the demon lord, they were actually defeated multiple times, and it was by a random demon general no less. Each time they lost, they would end up in a nearby village with all their wounds healed for some reason, but no matter how many times they went back, that demon kept defeating them in the most humiliating ways. Yoki is starting to feel a little guilty since he dragged out their defeat a few times so he could spend more time looking at Cecilia, but in his defense, he wasn't trying to humiliate them. Anyway, after each defeat, the party was forced to lie to the people and hide the fact that they had been defeated in order to preserve their faith in the hero party. But supplies were running low, and if they didn't defeat that demon soon, the people would lose all trust in them. That's when, on one attempt, the demon in question made them an offer. It said it would allow them to go straight to the demon lord's throne room unchallenged, but only if they were willing to leave Cecilia behind, and Mikana was the one who convinced everyone to abandon her, so Yuga wouldn't be seen as a failure. Cecilia ended up surviving, but Mikana doesn't think Yuga has forgiven her for making such a cruel choice. He still acts friendly and cheerful around her, but she can tell that his opinion of her has changed. Cecilia must also think of her differently after what happened, so things have been kind of awkward between them. Yoki feels partly to blame for all this because it was his actions that caused the rift to form in their party, but there's not much he can do to fix it. He asks her if she has at least tried talking to Cecilia about this, but how exactly is she supposed to do that? She can't just come out and say she was willing to sacrifice Cecilia because she cared more about protecting Yuga's honor as a hero. Yoki knows it's a tough topic to talk about, but if nothing is done, then they will all continue being awkward around each other indefinitely, so he tells her to give it some thought. Mikana realizes that Yoki is right, so she decides to do her best to make amends after all. Raven also decides to try talking to Happiness again, so he and Yoki head back to Cecilia's house. He eventually finds Happiness and apologizes to her for confessing so suddenly last time. He then hands her the pendant he bought and asks if she would like to start out as friends, and Happiness seems to like that idea. A few days go by, and Yoki is on the verge of passing away because he hasn't gotten to see Cecilia in almost a week now. After she got better, she's been busy visiting various villagers and healing the injured and sick people there. The rest of the hero party has also been pretty busy since Raven is the knight captain, Mikana is a royal magician, and Yuga has been taking on a lot of extermination and diplomatic missions. But he, on the other hand, has been doing absolutely nothing. Just then, Happiness knocks on Yoki's door and says she's here to deliver a message. Apparently, Cecilia sent her to inform Yoki that she's going to be coming back home this afternoon, and that means he's finally going to be able to see her again. He's extremely happy since this is the perfect chance for him to give her that necklace he bought since he missed his opportunity last time. However, as he is walking down the street, a random old lady with a fortune teller booth calls out to him and says he is going to have the worst luck imaginable today. This should be very concerning, but Yoki assumes it's just a scam and goes on about his day. After all, if he's on his way to meet Cecilia, what could possibly go wrong? First, Yoki heads to one of the local bakeries to pick up a gift for Cecilia. But the lady who usually works there is apparently taking the day off, so she asked her brother to fill in for her, and he's taking this a little too seriously. The situation is pretty awkward for Yoki, so he just orders a few cupcakes and leaves. But as he continues walking, he realizes that all the cupcakes were squished by that guy's bulging muscles. I mean, the cakes still taste good regardless, but it's still really unlucky that it happened to his batch. A few other things happen to Yoki on his walk to Cecilia's house. Like he accidentally bumps into this huge man, he nearly steps on some dog poop in the middle of the street, and then a kid bumps into him and drops his meat on the floor. Now Yoki could have ignored the kid and kept walking, but he's too much of a nice guy for that, so he offers to buy a new one to get the kid to stop crying even though it wasn't his fault. So far, only minor inconveniences have been happening to him, but Yoki's luck just keeps getting worse because a moment later, he gets his wallet snatched by a pickpocket. Now, some people would give up here, but Yoki's not letting his hard-earned money go to waste, so he uses a bit of his power to catch up to the pickpocket and kicks the shit out of him. Yoki was completely justified here, but unfortunately, Yuga happened to be nearby, and all he saw was Yoki kicking a dude to the floor and taking a bag of money. Yoki tries to explain that this is just a misunderstanding, but Yuga isn't buying it, so he starts attacking Yoki, trying to get him to surrender. Now, Yoki could definitely beat Yuga's ass if he wanted to, but that would blow his cover as a regular human, so he decides to run away instead. However, that doesn't work out for him since his path is quickly blocked by a bunch of knights, and fighting his way out now would only cause more problems for him down the line, so Yoki ends up surrendering. He gets thrown in jail for his supposed crime, and he's starting to think that the fortune teller might have been right about him being unlucky today. That said, it's not all bad since he's still got friends looking out for him, and a little while later, Duke shows up to pay him a visit. Duke was scouted by the Royal Knights a few days ago, and he thinks it's funny that Yoki got himself into this kind of trouble so soon. Yoki argues that he didn't do anything wrong, but Duke already knows that, and he tells Yoki there's no need to worry. Raven has heard about the whole thing, and he is currently looking into the matter, so it's only a matter of time before the whole thing is resolved. Just then, another knight, Irene, comes up and tells Yoki that he has been cleared of all wrongdoing and is free at go. Yoki is relieved to hear that, but then she tells him that Yuga apparently wants to meet with him to apologize, which is the last thing Yoki was expecting to hear. Later on, Yoki meets Yuga at a restaurant, and Yuga is sincerely sorry for all the trouble he caused, so to make it up to Yoki, he offers him a feast. Yoki is blinded by the sheer innocence coming off Yuga, and it's clear that he has no bad intentions, so he decides to take him up on his offer. And after the meal has been consumed, Yuga starts some small talk. First, he says he had no idea that Yoki was friends with Raven, and though he didn't recognize him at the time, now that he got a chance to speak to Yoki, he realizes that he's the same guy who was hanging out with Cecilia last time. On that note, he asks Yoki what his relationship with Cecilia is, and Yoki calmly answers that the two of them are still only friends, which Yuga is relieved to hear, but then he says he wants to ask Yoki for some advice. He says he wants to know how to get along well with Cecilia, and that's the last thing Yoki would want to talk about with Yuga. He tells Yuga that he and Cecilia only became friends recently, so if he wants advice on how to get along with her, he should try asking someone who has known her a lot longer, like Mikana for example. However, Yuga says he can't ask Mikana for advice since she probably hates Cecilia. Yoki is shocked to hear him say this and asks if he heard Mikana say this herself, but Yuga says that's not the case. He just knows that Mikana doesn't like Cecilia. He reveals that during the final battle, Mikana convinced the team to abandon Cecilia, and there's no way she would have done that if she didn't hate Cecilia. Yoki doesn't think it's fair for Yuga to assume Mikana's intentions even though he hasn't talked to her about it yet. He says Mikana was just as upset as everyone else about leaving Cecilia behind because she was crying the whole time, but Yuga asks him how he could possibly know that when he wasn't even there. Yoki still can't reveal the fact that he is the demon from back then, so he gets Yuga to drop the subject with a foolproof explanation. Trust me, bro chacho. Yuga doesn't question Yoki any further, but he refuses to accept that Mikana wasn't at fault, because if it's not her fault, then that must mean it was his fault instead, and he would never be able to forgive himself for abandoning Cecilia. Yoki tells him that he needs to stop pushing the blame onto his friends, because if he can't accept responsibility for his own actions, then he doesn't deserve to call himself a hero. Yuga suddenly bursts into tears, and Yoki thinks he might have gone a little too far with the yelling, but it turns out that Yoki's words really help Yuga understand where he went wrong. Mikana has been his childhood friend for ages, and she has always been by his side to support him ever since he became a hero. Yet he couldn't put his faith in her, and chose to believe she abandoned Cecilia out of hatred. He doesn't know how he could ever make things right between the two of them. Yoki tells him he can just apologize because Mikana clearly still cares about him, and even if she may scold him a little, she'll definitely forgive him in the end. Yuga is overjoyed and says he's going to apologize right now, but he's too nervous to do it on his own, so he asks Yoki and Raven to come along as well. They all eventually arrive at Mikana's house, but Yoki is a bit upset that he got dragged on such a long detour when he just wanted to visit Cecilia today. Yuga says he just needs some moral support so they can wait outside while he goes in to apologize to her. Yuga then walks inside and runs up to Mikana's room where he finds her in the middle of changing clothes, but while Mikana immediately becomes flustered, Yuga remains stone-faced and tells her he has something important to say. He tells her that he just realized that he has been treating her unfairly this entire time because he kept thinking she intentionally abandoned Cecilia when that wasn't the case. He knows an apology won't be enough to make up for what he has done, but he hopes she can forgive him so they can go back to how things were before. Mikana is really relieved that Yuga doesn't hate her anymore, but then remembers that she's still in her underwear, and she doesn't know which is worse, the fact that Yuga barged in on her changing, or the fact that he is completely unfazed by it. Either way, she's still mad about it, so she takes her anger out on Yuga, and outside, Raven and Yoki can see what's going on, but there's nothing they can do to help, so they both just leave Yuga to his fate. He is finally free to go see Cecilia, and on his way, he passes by that fortune teller again, but he still thinks it's a scam, so he doesn't stop to listen. The fortune teller doesn't appreciate being ignored for the second time in a row today, but for some reason, it looks like Yoki's luck is turning around for the better, so he must have done a really good deed recently. A little further down the road, Yoki runs into the owner of the cake shop, and she just found out that most of the cakes Yoki bought earlier today were accidentally crushed by her brother, so she wants to apologize for that. Yoki tells her it's not a big deal, but she still wants to make it right, so she offers him a new bag of cakes. Yoki then continues on his way, but all of a sudden, he is surrounded by 3 men in suits, and at first it may seem like he's in trouble. But it turns out that these men are the personal attendants of the boy from earlier, and they wanted to repay Yoki's kindness by offering him a bag of meat skewers. A little while later, Yoki finally arrives at Cecilia's house, but Happiness is a bit upset since he's really late. He heads inside to finally meet Cecilia, and she's really happy to see him since it has been a long time since they got to see each other. Yoki says he has a gift for her, and Cecilia is grateful, but she's never seen someone pair cakes with meat before. That aside, she offers to make a pot of tea so they can share the snacks while they catch up, but Yoki is surprised to hear that since making tea is usually a maid's job. Cecilia proudly explains that she recently got Sophia to teach her a few household skills, so she now knows how to make tea properly and she can cook without burning the food 70% of the time. After a few minutes of chatting, Cecilia finds out about Happiness and Raven becoming friends, as well as Yoki becoming acquainted with Mikana and Yuga. But speaking of those two, they suddenly hear Yuga's voice calling for Cecilia. A few moments later, Yuga barges into Cecilia's room and tells her that he has a lot he wants to apologize for, but Mikana punches him out of the way and tells him he is being too pushy. Cecilia has no idea what's going on, and Yoki is just as surprised since he didn't think the others would show up here all of a sudden, but they all have something to apologize for. Mikana goes first and says she is sorry for abandoning Cecilia back then. Cecilia tells all of them that it doesn't bother her that much because her life wasn't the only one at risk back then. After all, the others had to face the Demon Lord on their own without a healer to support them. And as it turns out, as soon as the Demon Lord had been defeated, Mikana was the first one to run back to make sure Cecilia was alright, followed shortly by Yuga and Raven. The fact that they all ran back to try and help her despite their exhaustion from the battle showed Cecilia that they still cared about her. And it's not like there was any other choice at the time, so Cecilia couldn't possibly blame them for the choice they made. All that matters now is that everyone made it out alive, so there's no need to feel guilty over what happened. Later that same day, Yoki and Cecilia are out taking a walk, and Cecilia asks if Yoki had anything to do with the others apologizing all of a sudden. He admits that he gave them a little nudge in the right direction since the whole thing was kind of his fault to begin with, and Cecilia is grateful because her friends are finally back together. This feels like the perfect opportunity, so Yoki tells Cecilia he has a present for her and reaches for the necklace he bought. He asks her if she's willing to accept it, and she happily tells him she will cherish it forever, which is a huge relief for Yoki because he didn't know what he would do if she had turned him down. A little while later, Cecilia asks Yoki to join her on a mission because she received a call for help from a remote village. Yoki is more than happy to offer his assistance, but Seek is here too, and he's not happy about that. This was supposed to be Yoki's chance to spend some quality alone time with Cecilia, but Seek didn't want to be left out, so he found a way to insert himself, and it's already too late to kick him out. The group eventually arrives at the village in question, and Cecilia had heard that this place was attacked by bandits, but it's way worse than she thought it would be. The village chief soon comes out to greet Cecilia, and he is delighted that the famous priestess has decided to pay a visit to their village, but he has no idea who Yoki and Seek are. Cecilia informs him that these two are her friends, and they are both skilled with healing magic, So they are here to help treat the injured, and the chief is happy to hear that. He leads them to the town hall where all the injured people are being kept, and the group gets to work immediately. They start healing the villagers one by one, and personally, this much healing is practically nothing for Yoki, but he can tell that Cecilia is working really hard. He admires how much she cares about helping the injured. But speaking of the injured, Yoki is surprised that there were so many injuries, yet no fatalities among the villagers. The chief explains that they got lucky because midway through the raid, the bandits were attacked and forced to retreat. It was a fortunate turn of events, but Yoki thinks it's a bit strange that someone just so happened to show up in time to save the villagers. Just then, Yoki looks over at Cecilia, and he realizes that she may be pushing herself a little too far, so he walks over and asks her to take a break. However, Cecilia refuses to listen to him because she still wants to help the people, so Yoki is forced to take matters into his own hands and casts a knockout spell on her. He realizes that a random guy knocking out a priestess may look bad, but he assures everyone that she's only asleep, and he just wanted to make her take a break. A little while later, Cecilia finally wakes up from her involuntary nap, and she is pissed at Yoki for casting a sleep spell on her with no warning. Yoki apologizes, but he says he had no choice, because at the rate Cecilia was pushing herself, she would have passed out from mana exhaustion if he hadn't done something. Cecilia acknowledges that she may have been pushing herself a little too far, so she can see why Yoki was concerned about her, but she still wants him to promise never to use magic on her without permission again. Yoki promises, and in case she's still worried about treating the villagers, he tells her she can relax because he and Seek have already finished taking care of them. Cecilia is really happy to hear that and thanks him sincerely, but just then, the village chief comes in to check on things. He is glad to see that Cecilia is feeling better, and he hates to ask more of her. But there's a little girl who lives on the outskirts of town, and he was hoping the group could go take a look at her. They ask if the girl was attacked by the bandits as well, but thankfully, that isn't the case. She is perfectly safe, but she has been weak and sickly ever since birth, so he was hoping Cecilia might be able to help make her healthy. Cecilia is willing to try, so she asks the chief to give them directions to the girl's house, and a few minutes later, they finally meet Teal. Teal is surprised to see a bunch of strangers walk into her house all of a sudden, but Cecilia assures her that there's nothing to be worried about because the village chief is the one who sent them here. It looks like Teal is about to ask a question, but all of a sudden, she starts having a huge coughing fit. And everyone can see that the chief wasn't exaggerating when he said Teal was really sick. Seek goes up to her to offer some special medicine he made to help, and at first, Teal is a bit skeptical about accepting mystery juice from a random stranger, but Yoki assures her that Seek knows what he's doing, so that medicine is perfectly safe. Teal takes his word for it and downs the whole bottle, and to her surprise, her throat actually feels a little better now. She is really thankful and is sure that the group coming here must have been a blessing from the guardian deity, but Yoki has no idea what that is. Teal explains that the guardian deity is the statue of the god on the outskirts of town. She explains that on the day of the bandit attack, she was heading back to the village after leaving an offering at the statue, but she suddenly felt really sleepy and passed out in the forest. That's why she was able to avoid being hurt by the bandits, and she is sure that must have been the deity protecting her. Seek points out that it could have been a complete coincidence, but Teal is absolutely certain of the guardian's protection. After all, when she was 7 years old, she was surrounded by wolves one night, and she almost certainly would have died, but at the last second, the guardian deity came to her rescue with black lightning. And since then, it has been protecting her. Teal doesn't see anything weird about it, but the sleep magic and black lightning sound an awful lot like something a demon might use, so Yoki and Cecilia are a bit suspicious. Teal swears that her deity isn't suspicious at all, and she even offers to lead them to him just to prove it. However, when she does show it to them, I mean, come on, that's clearly a demon statue. Teal gets upset and says she will not stand for anyone slandering her beloved guardian, but she can barely stand as it is, so Cecilia apologizes for pushing her too far and walks Teal back to her house. While Cecilia is gone, Yoki takes a closer look at the statue, and he realizes that it looks really similar to one of those gargoyles that they had back in the Demon Lord's castle. But as soon as he says this, the gargoyle comes to life and attacks him with black lightning. Yoki dodges out of the way, and Seek manages to subdue the gargoyle, but they aren't sure what to do with it now. Seek suggests they should just kill it, but Yoki tells him to stop because he would rather try talking things out first before resorting to violence. After they've all calmed down, the gargoyle sits and asks if they really don't intend to kill him. Yoki reminds him that he's the one who attacked them first, and the gargoyle apologizes for that, but after hearing Yoki identify him as a demon gargoyle, he realized he had been exposed and kind of panicked. He explains that several years ago, he was originally created to guard a certain temple, but along the way, some bandits stole him. Those same bandits later went on to attack this village, so the gargoyle had had enough and struck them down with its lightning. But this act made the villagers start worshipping it as a guardian deity. Over time, they all slowly forgot about him, so the only one who still shows up is Teal, and she has been coming here to clean every day ever since the gargoyle saved her as a kid. Yoki asks if that means the gargoyle has no intention of harming the villagers, and the gargoyle responds that he has nothing to do with the humans, he just lives here, that's all. If that's the case, then there's no reason to worry about it, so Yoki apologizes for bothering the gargoyle and turns to return to the village, but before that, he asks Seek to do him a little favor. Yoki basically asked Seek to go to the village on his own so he could spend the rest of this trip alone with Cecilia, but once he was finally alone with her, he realized that he doesn't actually have anything to talk about. As they are walking, Cecilia ends up tripping over a protruding root, so Yoki jumps in to catch her, and the two of them end up staring at each other for a few seconds before awkwardly turning away. A little while later, they finally return to the village, and as luck would have it, the bandits from earlier decided to attack the village again, and they are confident that nothing will stop them this time, but all of a sudden, Yoki, Cecilia, and Seek show up to stop them. The bandits are still certain that these brats stand no chance against their sheer numbers, but then Yoki gives Seek permission to fight with lethal intent, and the bandits start dropping like flies. Cecilia is surprised by how strong Seek is since she had never seen him fight before. But Yoki is a lot stronger, so when he joins the fight, he knocks out a couple dozen of them at once, and even when one attempts to sneak attack Cecilia, Yoki easily electrocutes the guy and takes him down because he has total control over the situation. The battle against the bandits has been going pretty well so far, but all of a sudden, the group notices smoke coming from the direction of the guardian deity's shrine, and that can't be good. So Yoki asks Seek to go check it out while he finishes off the rest of the bandits. The remaining bandits all group together in an attempt to swarm Cecilia and Yoki, but Yoki bluntly tells them that no matter how many of them there may be, they will never be a match for him. He then proceeds to blow them all away with a windstorm spell, and the bandit situation has been officially taken care of, but Yoki is a bit concerned by the fact that Seek hasn't returned from the shrine yet. Something might have happened to him, so Yoki and Cecilia go to check it out, and to their shock, they find the gargoyle severely injured and Seek being held up by his throat. Yoki angrily glares at the guy and demands to know who he is, so Cecilia explains that this is Miller, the hero of the neighboring Gallus Empire. Yoki is surprised to learn that there is more than one hero in the world, but Seek's safety is what's important right now. Once Seek regains consciousness, he explains that he came here and found Miller attacking the gargoyle from behind while it was trying to protect Teal, so he tried to stop him, but ended up losing the fight. Miller says there's nothing wrong with him trying to kill a gargoyle, and it's Seek's fault for being dumb enough to get in his way. He then starts walking back over to the gargoyle to finish it off, but Yoki tells him to stop and tries to talk him out of it by explaining that the gargoyle isn't causing any harm. However, Miller doesn't care whether the gargoyle is harmless or not, and if Yoki tries to stop him, then he's going to cut him down as well. Yoki responds by firing off a lightning bolt, but to his surprise, the lightning completely dissipates the second it comes in contact with Miller's sword. Cecilia yells for Yoki to fall back because Miller's weapon is a man-made magic sword that absorbs all magic it touches, so Yoki is no match for him. Cecilia begs Miller to stop because if innocent people die at his hand, it could start a war, but Miller actually likes the sound of that. One of his favorite hobbies is killing people, so if a war were to start, he would be allowed to kill as many people as he wants. It's clear that this dude is a psychopath, so there's no way Yoki can let him walk free after this. Miller laughs at the fact that Yoki thinks he can win this fight even though he already knows his magic is completely ineffective against this sword. However, Yoki isn't fazed and begins firing off several blasts of magic one after the other. Miller's sword may absorb magic, but since it was man-made, then there has to be a limit to how much it can absorb. And after unleashing a bunch of his most powerful spells, Yoki eventually hits that limit, shattering Miller's sword altogether. Yoki then uses a wind spell to punch Miller into a tree, and it looks like he has been defeated, but Miller still had one last trick up his sleeve and threw a magic spear at Yoki. A trick like that would never work on Yoki, so he easily dodges it, but the gargoyle happened to be right behind him. The spear was headed right for him, but at the last second, Teal suddenly jumped in front of him and took a spear to the chest. That wasn't what Miller was expecting, but he still finds it really amusing that the girl would sacrifice herself to save a demon. Yoki turns back to Miller and tells him that he won't get away with this, but Miller already has an escape plan ready and fires a bunch of arrows at Yoki's friends, forcing him to create a shield to protect them. And during this time, Miller manages to sneak into the forest. Yoki blames himself for letting Miller escape because he had been relying too much on his magic, and all that anger building up inside him causes his true demon form to come out. This is a form that Cecilia has never seen before, so she is worried that Yoki might have lost control. But right now, there's only one thing on Yoki's mind, and that's to beat the shit out of Miller. He flies into the air to start tracking Miller, and the second he locates him, he pins his head to the ground and proceeds to kick him through a couple hundred trees. Miller can't believe that a demon this strong still exists even though the demon lord has already been defeated, but a second later, Yoki appears behind him to continue the beatdown. Miller tries to fight back, but Yoki easily disarms him and knocks him to his knees before dragging him into the air by his neck. Now, he could kill Miller here and now, but he knows that's not something Cecilia would want him to do, so instead, he just drops Miller and lets him take his chances with the water. Yoki eventually returns to Teal's house, where he finds Cecilia waiting for him. He asks how the others are doing, so she tells him she was able to heal Teal and Seek, so they both survived, and she is really glad that Yoki came back in one piece. Cecilia invited Teal to work as a maid in her home, so she will have a place to stay, and in the meantime, both Cecilia and Yoki have been summoned to the castle for an urgent matter. As Yoki kneels before the king, he's a bit nervous, since he's worried that this king might be an insufferably arrogant jerk like the Demon King, but to his surprise, the king is actually a chill guy. He isn't one to stand on formality, so he cuts to the chase and explains that he heard about how Cecilia and Yoki chased off the hero Miller and the bandits that were attacking the village of Dagaz, so he wants to give them a reward for their efforts. Cecilia tells the king that she doesn't want a reward, which he pretty much expected from a saint, so then he turns to Yoki and asks if there's anything he wants. Yoki informs the king that he does have a great desire, but he says it's something even a king like him wouldn't be able to grant. This gets the king curious, since there aren't many things he can't acquire, so he asks Yoki what his desire is, and Yoki blurts out that he wants to earn Cecilia's love, though he didn't really think it through before saying it out loud because Cecilia is seriously embarrassed now. A little while later, they return to Cecilia's house, and she's yelling at Yoki for embarrassing her like that in front of the king. Yoki apologizes for his mistake, but Cecilia's mom finds the whole thing hilarious, so she decides to use the situation to tease Yoki and Cecilia a little. She tells Yoki that he needs to reflect on what he has done, so for the next month, he is prohibited from seeing Cecilia at all. This is worse than a prison sentence for Yoki, but he's not the only one panicking, because even though he embarrassed her, Cecilia can't imagine going a whole month without talking to Yoki. So she tries to talk her mom out of it. Aqua relents a little and agrees to cut the time down to 2 weeks, but she still insists that Yoki and Cecilia be separated, so she orders Happiness to take Yoki away. Happiness complies and starts dragging Yoki away, but as they go through the halls, they end up spotting Seek sitting in the garden alone, and he looks awfully sad. Yoki assumes that it must have something to do with what happened with Miller and the fact that Seek wasn't able to protect Teal or the gargoyle, but he has no idea how to cheer him up, so he just goes home for now. There, he finds Teal taking care of the gargoyle, and the reason the gargoyle is here is because Cecilia's mom didn't let Teal bring him into the mansion. Happiness tells Teal she needs to return to the mansion and get back to work, so they prepare to leave. But Gar is a little worried that she might be pushing herself too hard considering her condition. Once the others are gone, Yoki lays down on his bed and thinks about what he's going to do now that he can't talk to Cecilia anymore. He usually spent most of his days at her house, so he's going to have to find something else to do with all this free time, which is why he heads to the guild first thing the next morning and asks to be given as much work as feasibly possible so he doesn't get bored. Roughly half a month later, we see Cecilia at home, and the whole not talking to Yoki thing is hitting her pretty hard because she still finds herself subconsciously making cups of tea for him, even though he's not here. Her mother has been enjoying every moment of watching Cecilia miss Yoki, so she jumps at the opportunity and starts teasing her, asking who the second cup of tea is for. Cecilia gets embarrassed and lies that she made the cup expecting her mother to show up, but they all know that's not true. Aqua mentions that the 2-week time frame is almost up, so Yoki will be allowed to visit again soon, and she's honestly a bit curious as to what Yoki has been doing to pass the time. Meanwhile, Yoki has just returned home after pulling an all-nighter to finish all his quests. Gar asks him why he's in such a good mood, but Yoki is just excited since he finally gets to see Cecilia again soon. Gar is happy for him, but he says there's something serious he needs to talk to him about. Gar then returns to his original gargoyle form, and in this state, Yoki can clearly see that Gar's body is falling apart. Gar says the injuries he suffered from Miller turned out to be far more serious than he thought they were, and he estimates that he has a few days at most left to live. Yoki asked why he didn't say something sooner, but Gar didn't think it would make a difference since there's no way to fix his body. The only thing he wants now is for Yoki to look after Teal once he's gone. Yoki doesn't understand what Gar is talking about since Seek said Teal's conditions had stabilized, but while it's true that she has improved a lot thanks to Seek's medicine, Gar has watched Teal ever since she was little, and he can tell that something's not right with her. He just doesn't want her to be alone after he falls apart, which is why he wants Yoki to take care of her. Yoki understands and promises that he will look after Teal, which makes Gar very happy. But just as he starts talking about passing away in peace now, Yoki interrupts him and says he still intends to save Gar's life no matter what it takes. Gar appreciates the sentiment, but he tells Yoki there's not enough time for him to be saved at this point. However, that won't stop him from trying. So he immediately heads out to talk to Duke about finding some remedies for Gar's situation. Duke has apparently heard all about gargoyle disintegration, and according to him, it's easily fixable as long as you feed the gargoyle some magicite. Yoki is shocked because he didn't realize the solution was that simple, so he thanks Duke for his help and runs off to go find some magicite. Unfortunately, he was in such a rush that he didn't hear Duke mention that there's more to the explanation, but that certainly won't cause any problems down the road. As Yoki leaves the Knight's Hall, he realizes he doesn't actually know where to find magicite in the first place, but before he can look into it, he suddenly hears Cecilia calling out his name. And it sounds like something terrible has happened. She runs up to him and explains that Teal is in really bad shape right now, so they need his help. Yoki rushes over to the mansion to see what's going on, and there, he finds Teal in bed with a high fever while Seek scrambles to make some medicine for her. Her condition rapidly deteriorated because she has been overworking herself a lot recently, and the medicine Seek has on hand at the moment is only enough to slow down her symptoms, not cure them. They would need some twilight grass to cure her, but the grass is only found in regions that are rich in mana, so it doesn't grow here. Yoki offers to go find the grass to bring it back for Teal, and Cecilia offers to help, which Yoki really appreciates, especially since he still needs to find magicite for Gar. Upon hearing Gar's name, Teal gets worried and tries to sit up in bed because she thinks something might have happened to him. But Seek pushes her back down because she needs to rest as much as possible to prevent her fever from getting worse. Twilight grass and magicite may be rare, but there's still a chance that the Merchants Guild has some in stock since they always carry valuable goods. But unfortunately, when they arrive at the Merchant Guild, they are informed that all the magicite and twilight grass is currently out of stock. This is the worst news imaginable, but as Yoki and Cecilia are trying to think of what to do, Kramen suddenly shows up, and he's here to collect a request form from the Merchant Guild. He then notices Yoki standing there, and he tries to pawn the request off on him. But Yoki refuses and says he doesn't have time to be taking random requests right now. Kramen overheard that Yoki is looking for magicite and twilight grass, so he tries to persuade Yoki by informing him that the quest is to deal with a monster living in a magicite mine. The magical energy in the mine is so dense. Twilight grass happens to grow in the mine as well, so it would be in Yoki's best interest to accept the mission. Yoki and Cecilia agree to join the mission alongside Kramen, and Sophia tags along as well, partially to support her husband, but also because it is her duty as head maid to make sure that Teal makes a full recovery. It takes 2 days for them to arrive in the town with the magicite mine, but once they finally arrive, Sophia tells everyone to get ready to head out first thing tomorrow morning. Yoki is a bit confused since he thought they would be heading to the mines immediately, but he is told they can't do that because monsters are mostly active at night, and the one they are after is especially dangerous. It is a rock eater that mutated after eating a bunch of magicite. It is extreme resistant to magic attacks, and the request says they need to bring its hide back in one piece, so their best option for dealing with it is to restrain it before taking it out. The next morning, everyone is ready to begin their mission, but Yoki and Cecilia are surprised that Sophia intends to go into battle wearing her maid uniform. Sophia says there's no need to be concerned because she is perfectly fine fighting in the maid outfit, but the main reason she's wearing it is because she likes the fact that Kramen thinks it looks cute on her. As they head into the mine, they soon spot the rock eater munching on a bunch of magicite, and as it notices them, it begins chucking rocks their way. They all dodge out of the way, and just to try it out, Yoki fires a lightning spell at the monster. But just like Kramen said, the rock eater is highly resistant to magic. The only way for them to take it down without destroying the hide is to attack from the inside, so Kramen says he will use his shikigami to protect Sophia as she jumps into the monster's mouth. Cecilia thinks that sounds a little too dangerous, but Kramen isn't worried because he has full faith in Sophia's capabilities and she trusts him to protect her. Since they are both in agreement, Yoki and Cecilia pour all their effort into restraining the rock eater with a combination of Yoki's ice spell and Cecilia's chain binds. With the monster held in place, Kramen surrounds Sophia with all his shikigamis, and she proceeds to jump into the monster's gaping mouth, so now they just need to wait for her to destroy its guts. Unfortunately, The Rock Eater happened to have one more trick up its sleeve, so it created several smaller Rock Eaters, and these little guys are immune to magic as well. So Yoki is forced to put his hands up and box to keep them away. But unfortunately, without Yoki maintaining his ice spell, the Rock Eater is soon able to break through Cecilia's chains and knock her back. Yoki runs to her side to protect her, but as the Rock Eater is mid-step, it suddenly freezes because Sophia has started cutting it down from the inside. Before long, the Rock Eater collapses dead on the ground, and Kramen is incredibly relieved to see Sophia emerge from its mouth perfectly unharmed. Now that the monster has been taken care of, all that's left to do is gather the magicite and twilight grass that Yoki and Cecilia need, and fortunately, there's a lot of the stuff available here. After gathering the amount they'll need, the group leaves the cave, and Yoki is ready to start heading home to get the medicine to Teal and Gar, but Kramen tells him they can't leave today because it's not safe to travel at night in this area. This has Yoki frustrated since he wants to return to help the others as soon as possible, and he probably could have just flown back to the city before morning all on his own. But he can't let Kramen and Sophia find out that he's a demon. Later that night, while the others are asleep, Yoki slips out of bed and attempts to leave without waking anyone up, but Cecilia already predicted that he would try this, so he finds her waiting outside the door for him. Cecilia is in full support of Yoki's plan, so she took the liberty of preparing the pouch of items for him so he could leave immediately, and Yoki really appreciates her help. Shortly thereafter, Yoki takes off into the night sky, and a few hours later, he arrives in the city to deliver the medicine. He finds Gar on the table as usual, but he seems really unresponsive, so he starts to worry that it might already be too late to save him. He begins shaking Gar violently and asking if he's really okay with leaving Teal alone in this world, and hearing Teal's name mentioned is enough to snap Gar back to life. He asks if Teal is alright, and Yoki tells him she's going to be fine since he already dropped the twilight grass off with Seek, so all that's left is to feed Gar the magicite and fix him up too. As Yoki is busy stuffing Gar's face with magicite, he notices a claw mixed in with the rocks, but before he could identify it, Gar suddenly begins to glow, and a moment later, he is fully healed. The first thing Gar does after being healed is rush to Teal's side to check on her and let her know that he's going to be alright as well. Yoki is touched by the reunion, but he's still got a long night of flying ahead of him since he needs to get back to the mining village before the others start to suspect something. And after being up all night, he ends up passing out on Cecilia's thighs on the carriage ride home, which she doesn't mind at all. This was the end of episode 6. Subscribe to not miss the next part.